For centuries, Rome defeated almost every enemy that stood in its path. Kingdoms fell before its armies, powerful rivals were crushed, entire nations disappeared beneath the advance of Roman legions. With every victory, Rome grew stronger, richer, more confident. To many people living in the ancient world, Rome seemed unstoppable. But then, one man appeared who would challenge that belief. Not a king, not an emperor, not even a Roman. His name was Hannibal, and for nearly 2 decades, he would become Rome's greatest nightmare. Roman parents frightened their children with stories about him. Generals studied his movements with fear. Senators spoke his name with anger and frustration. Whenever reports arrived that Hannibal was nearby, panic spread across Italy. Villages prepared for attack, cities strengthened their defenses, entire armies were sent to stop him. Yet again and again, he found ways to survive, adapt, and strike back. But what made one commander so dangerous? How could a single man challenge the most powerful republic in the world? The answer begins far from Rome. Across the Mediterranean Sea, in the wealthy city of Carthage, a city that had once been Rome's greatest rival, a city that still carried the scars of earlier wars. When Hannibal was still a boy, his father, Hannibal Barca, brought him before an altar. There, according to ancient accounts, he was asked to make a promise he would never forget, an oath that he would never be a friend of Rome. Whether he fully understood its meaning at the time is impossible to know. But as he grew older, that oath became part of his identity. Years later, it would help shape one of the most famous conflicts in history. Within a few short years, Hannibal would rise to command an army. He would lead soldiers across mountains, rivers, and hostile territory. He would attempt feats that many considered impossible, and he would force Rome into a struggle unlike anything it had ever faced before. His campaigns would become legendary. His victories would shock the ancient world, and his name would be remembered for more than 2,000 years, because Hannibal was not simply fighting against Rome, he was determined to break Rome's power forever. Long before Hannibal became Rome's greatest enemy, before the famous battles, before the victories that shocked the ancient world, and before his name spread fear across Italy, he was simply a boy. A boy born into one of the most influential families in Carthage. At the time, Carthage was still one of the richest and most powerful cities in the Mediterranean. But beneath its wealth and pride, there was anger. Because when Hannibal was growing up, Carthage was living with the memory of a painful defeat. Only a few years earlier, Rome and Carthage had fought a long and brutal struggle known as the First Punic War. For more than 20 years, the two great powers battled for control of the western Mediterranean. Fleets sank beneath the waves, armies clashed across distant lands, entire communities suffered through the conflict. And when the war finally ended, Rome emerged victorious. For Carthage, the defeat was devastating. Territory was lost, wealth disappeared, pride was wounded. Among those who never accepted the outcome was Hannibal's father, Hannibal Barca, a talented commander and one of Carthage's most respected military leaders. Hannibal believed Rome had humiliated his people. He believed the conflict between the two powers was far from over, and he was convinced that another war would eventually come. Then came a moment that would echo through history. Before departing on a military campaign, Hannibal reportedly brought his young son before an altar. There, according to ancient sources, he asked Hannibal to make a solemn promise, an oath that he would never be a friend of Rome, never trust Rome, never stop opposing Rome. Historians still debate the details of the story. Some parts may have been exaggerated over time, others may be completely true, but whatever happened on that day, one thing is clear: Hannibal grew up with Rome constantly on his mind. As he became older, he followed his father into military life. He learned how armies moved, how battles were won, how commanders inspired loyalty. He studied leadership, strategy, and warfare from an early age, and with every passing year, his determination seemed to grow stronger. Meanwhile, Carthage began rebuilding its strength. Its influence expanded into Spain. New territories brought fresh resources and new opportunities. Wealth flowed back into Carthaginian hands. Armies grew larger, and Hannibal steadily rose through the ranks. Soldiers admired his courage. Officers respected his intelligence. He shared hardships with his men and earned their loyalty. Before long, he was no longer the son of a famous commander. He was a commander in his own right, one of the most powerful men in the Western Mediterranean. Across the sea, Rome paid little attention. Many Roman leaders believed Carthage had already been broken by the First Punic War. They believed their dominance was secure. They believed no rival could seriously threaten them again. But while Rome enjoyed its confidence, something important was happening in Spain. A new generation of Carthaginian soldiers was gathering. Their numbers were growing. Their experience was increasing, and standing at their head was a commander unlike any Rome had faced before. The boy who had once sworn an oath before an altar. The man who would soon bring war to Rome itself. In 219 BC, the fragile peace between Rome and Carthage finally came to an end. Years of tension, distrust, and rivalry erupted into open conflict. Both sides blamed the other. Both sides prepared for war, and both sides believed victory would come quickly. Rome expected the fighting to take place far from its homeland, perhaps in Spain, perhaps in North Africa, but certainly not in Italy itself. What Roman leaders did not realize was that Hannibal was planning something no one expected. Most commanders would have chosen the obvious route. They would have crossed to the sea and attacked by ship. It was faster, simpler, safer. It was the route Rome anticipated. Hannibal chose a different path, a path so dangerous that many considered it impossible. Instead of sailing to Italy, he decided he would march there. In the spring of 218 BC, Hannibal left Spain at the head of a massive army. Tens of thousands of soldiers followed him, infantry, cavalry, and animals that few Europeans had ever seen on a battlefield. War elephants. The journey ahead would test every man in the army. But Hannibal believed the risk was worth it. If Rome would not bring the war to him, then he would carry the war directly to Rome's doorstep. The challenges began almost immediately. Rivers blocked the army's path. Hostile tribes launched attacks from hidden positions. Supplies became harder to obtain. Every mile demanded effort. Every day brought new dangers. Yet Hannibal refused to stop. Again and again, he pushed forward. No matter how difficult the journey became, turning back was never an option. Then came the obstacle that stunned the ancient world. The Alps, massive mountains covered in snow, narrow paths carved into steep cliffs, bitter winds, freezing temperatures, treacherous terrain. Most people believed no army could cross them, especially not an army carrying horses, equipment, and elephants. Yet Hannibal pressed on. Men slipped from icy paths and vanished into ravines. Animals collapsed from exhaustion. Avalanches struck without warning. Food became scarce. Morale was tested every single day. But still, the army continued climbing, step by step, mile by mile, moving closer to Italy and closer to Rome. Weeks later, the impossible happened. Hannibal emerged from the Alps and entered northern Italy. The journey had come at a terrible cost. Thousands of soldiers had been lost. Many horses never survived the crossing. Most of the elephants were gone. But none of that changed the fact that Hannibal had achieved what Rome believed could never be done. A foreign army had crossed the Alps and entered Italy, and it was led by Hannibal Barca. For centuries, the mountains had served as a natural barrier protecting the Italian peninsula. Now that barrier had been broken. News spread quickly. Rome was stunned. Its leaders struggled to understand what had happened. Its generals rushed to respond. Panic and uncertainty began to spread, because somewhere in northern Italy, Hannibal Barca and his army were waiting, and the war that would make him a legend was only beginning.